Just as the RBI was the cat's paw of the government in the saga of demonetization, the RBI is being used by the government to push through its dangerous agenda. We call upon all the people of India and all political parties and all trade unions to join us in resolutely opposing the retrograde idea of allowing corporates and business houses to enter the banking sector and set up banks. What is the situation of depositors of Yes Bank? What is the situation of depositors of Lakshmi Vilas Bank? What is the situation of the depositors of Global Trust Bank? When banks fail, the depositors are at the mercy of the government, and they run from pillar to post to get their money back. If corporate houses begin to control banks, in the first few months or few years, it will all appear hunky-dory. But when that resources which they control are diverted to promote their own businesses, and some businesses fail, loans become NPAs, the depositors will be entirely at the mercy of the corporate house. The Congress party welcomes and supports the statement of Dr. Raghuram Rajan and Dr. Viral Acharya, stoutly opposing the proposal of the BJP government to allow corporates and business houses to enter the banking sector and establish banks. The proposal, ostensibly based on a report of an RBI internal working group, has the fingerprints of the Modi government written all over it. This proposal, along with some other recommendations, is part of a deeper game plan to control the banking industry. The proposal, if implemented, will completely reverse the enormous gains made in the last 50 years of retrieving the banking sector from the clutches of business houses. All over the world, especially in developed economies, three principles govern banking. One, broad-based shareholding reflecting shareholder democracy. Two, strict separation of ownership and management. Ownership with shareholders and management in professional hands. And three, prohibition of connected lending, building a wall between lender and borrower. All three principles will be thrown out of the window if corporates and business houses are allowed to set up banks. Bank funds belong to depositors who are the people of this country. As a proportion of total deposits, the equity of a bank is minuscule. The total deposits in the banking industry is the order of rupees 140 lakh crore. Let me repeat that number, 140 lakh crore rupees. If business houses are allowed to own banks, they will, with a small equity investment, control very large amounts of the nation's financial resources. This must not happen, and the Congress will strive its utmost to ensure that this will not happen. It is on record that the idea, when first mooted, was opposed by all but one expert who were consulted. Dr. Rajan and Dr. Acharya have given cogent and convincing reasons why the idea is totally retrograde and why it will lead to concentration of economic and political power. It is shocking that such an idea should have been presented to the people as though it has the imprimatur of experts and the endorsement of the RBI. Just as the RBI was the cat's paw of the government in the saga of demonetization, The RBI is being used by the government to push through its dangerous agenda. This is another example of the Modi government pandering to the aggrandizement and acquisitive ambitions of the business houses of India. If the proposal goes through, it is no secret which politically connected business houses will get the first licenses and increase their monopolistic power. There are some other proposals of the IWG that are controversial and highly debatable. They require a separate analysis and exposition. We should reserve them for another day because today we want you and your readers and viewers to focus on the core proposal of allowing corporates and business houses to set up banks. The Congress party condemns the proposal and demands that the government unequivocally and forthwith declare that it has no intention of pursuing the proposal. We call upon all the people of India and all political parties and all trade unions to join us in resolutely opposing the retrograde idea of allowing corporates and business houses to enter the banking sector and set up banks. This is not the idea of the RBI. It cannot be the idea of the IWG because everyone they consulted, except one, opposed the idea. And to be fair to the IWG, they've added the minutes to their report. It is not the RBI's idea. The RBI did not recommend demonetization on its own. The Modi government forced the RBI to make the recommendation and then said RBI has recommended and we are doing it. So similarly, they are misusing the RBI. India's most venerable institution is being misused and abused to push the political agenda of Mr. Modi and his government. What is the situation of depositors of Yes Bank? What is the situation of depositors of Lakshmi Vilas Bank? What is the situation of the depositors of Global Trust Bank? When banks fail, the depositors are at the mercy of the government. And they run from pillar to post to get their money back. If corporate houses begin to control banks, in the first few months or few years, it will all appear hunky-dory. But when that resources which they control are diverted to promote their own businesses, and some businesses fail, loans become NPAs, the depositors will be entirely at the mercy of the corporate house. The government will wash its hands and say, you chose to put your money in a private bank run by a corporate house, how are we responsible? That is why I say this is completely retrograde. It has got very serious consequences. And Dr. Rajan and Dr. Acharya have raised many, many questions. There has been no answer from the government for the last several hours. Why now? Why this idea? Who supported it? Everything is opaque. And the opaqueness leads us to believe that it is entirely Mr. Modi's idea. And I'm sure his cabinet ministers did not know about this idea either. The Congress party's position is very clear. While we have no objection to private sector banks growing, we are very clear that public sector banks must remain public sector banks. I think Dr. Manmohan Singh, when he was Prime Minister, made that very clear, and I have reiterated it as Finance Minister. Public sector banks must remain public sector banks. But what they are doing now, by allowing corporates to enter the banking sector, is to weaken the public sector bank, enlarge the footprint of the private sector, allow corporates to enter private sector banks, and eventually get control of a huge part of the depositors' money. In the long run, this will weaken the public sector banks. in the long run, public sector banks will begin to fail, which is why we are very clear in our mind that corporate houses and business houses should not be allowed entry into the banking sector or be given licenses to set up banks. Firstly, there are very, very strict guidelines and criteria of who will get a bank license. Only a fit and proper person can get a bank license. Sometimes even those choices turn out to be wrong choices. Yes Bank is an example. People thought that the promoters of Yes Bank were fit and proper persons. Ultimately, it turned out they were not fit and proper persons. But once you allow corporate houses to enter, what kind of choice will you make? What kind of criterion will you apply to choose whether the particular corporate house is fit and proper? It will be political largesse, political patronage, and only the politically connected corporate houses will get these licenses. I mean, that you know, I know, the whole world knows, but yet we are unwilling to speak up. Congress party speaking up today. We know who will get the first licenses. So there's a vast difference between professional bankers, highly qualified professionals, being fit and proper persons promoting a bank. For example, some banks have been promoted. Bandhan Bank has been promoted. But somebody who's done many, many years of service in micro lending, he has promoted the Bandhan Bank. So similarly, many qualified individuals or groups of individuals can promote a bank. They are professionals. But to ask a corporate business house to promote a bank and control a bank is to pave the way for monopolistic power over resources. Please understand, this is not over land, this is not over technology, this is not over any other asset. This is over money, and money belonging to the people. So there's a vast difference between professionals, fit and proper persons being allowed to set up banks under very strict criteria and allowing corporates and business houses to set up banks.
अगर आपको हमारे वीडियोस पसंद आए तो प्लीज लाइक करें, सब्सक्राइब करें और शेयर करें।